Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Today, we will be having a program with Dr. G. And welcome, Dr. G.
Thank you so much.
So it's about healthy diet for a healthy brain and body. So we are having this program sponsored by White Tulip Health Foundation. And I just want to read a short introduction that the White Tulip about the White Tulip Foundation. Okay, so White Tulip Health Foundation is a non-profit organization that connects healthcare professionals who want to give back to society. It's to create a platform where they can share ideas and experiences, provide mutual support, and collaborate, channel their own professional passions and skills in community projects, both locally and abroad. The founders of White Tulip were inspired by the white tulip flower, which is an important symbol of purity, caring, and inspiration. As our foundation grows, we continue to be inspired by this perennial sun seeker and seek to share our passion for healthcare improvement. We are inspired by the countless healthcare professionals who go beyond the call of duty in empowering, improving the health and well-being of societies around the world. White Tulip Health Foundation aims to nurture this ethos of giving and service in our medical communities and at home and abroad. This was a short note from the foundation that I actually read it to you. So Dr. G is here today with us to talk about the healthy diet programs and how to stay healthy. So is it okay for me to read like a short introduction about you, or would you like to do it?
Whatever makes you happy. It's whatever makes you comfortable.
I will start. Okay, Dr. G, I will start, and you can continue and fill the gaps, whatever you feel. You can feel free to do that. Okay, so the Dr. G is a board certified family medicine doctor with additional training in functional medicine, who has a passion for empowering patients to achieve true wellness. She believes strongly that food is medicine and that the choices we make each day are the most powerful way to support health. She is excited to share some simple tips on healthy eating with us today, which we all need, I believe, Dr. G.
Absolutely. I think after this past year or year and a half, healthy eating is even more important because it's been a tough time. So I am so excited to be here. I feel like I get questions all the time about how to make sense of all the different diet information that's out there. So my goal today is that everyone will leave with a solid understanding of how to make those decisions, right? And to make them in a way that works for you, because we're not all exactly the same. And so some of us have to adapt different dietary recommendations and make it fit our own personal health challenges or health needs. So I have been doing all kinds of wellness education. I actually have a wellness practice at the moment, but I used to work with UH, and before that, Ohio State. I've been very blessed over the years to work in lots of different communities in both Ohio and California, and really just get a sense for how challenging it can be to try to eat healthy and still do everything we have to do all day. So hopefully we're going to make that simpler right now. If anybody has questions, what's that?
So that was the question from my side, that we already have some questions.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so would you like to answer like in between your presentation, or at the end of the whole
Right. So
introduction?
a lot of questions will probably get answered as I go along, but if there's something that isn't making sense, absolutely please interrupt me with those questions and I will clarify. But if it's something that's more general, if you want to just wait till the end, then we can cover it, because you might find that the answer already happened during the talk.
Okay, I will check the questions and then we'll see if there is anything related to your topic, or in the meantime, while you're talking, I will just read it to you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, let's see. It's coming, like there are more questions now.
I does see that there's also a question about whether the slides or recording would be shared. I don't know the answer to that one.
It didn't come to me. Maybe it
I
was
think it
for
came on the
you.
chat. I had the chat open.
Oh, you are in the chat. I was checking the question QA session. Okay, let me see the chat. The slides. Maybe if you would like to share your slides with people, I mean,
That's
attendees or
totally
us,
fine. Yeah, I
you
can
can
send a copy.
send it. Yeah, we can share. I mean, but not from, like, not the recording. I mean, separately, like only slides as a slides.
Absolutely. So I am hoping that they will speak for themselves. It's designed to be a little bit more entertaining than it is to be feeling like a lecture. And so there's a lot of imagery, but I think that they can communicate quite a bit in those pictures, even without my voice in the background. All right, I'm going to dive in. As I mentioned, my name is Dr. Tamara Gutierrez. Everybody calls me Dr. G because Gutierrez was a mouthful for a lot of people. And my website is drgpath2wellness.com if anybody wants to learn anything else about me and what I'm doing. All right, let's see if I can get it to move forward. So I like to start by just reminding everybody that the human body is unbelievably complex, right? There are more cells in your body than there are galaxies in the universe. And they all work together in an intricate dance that makes up you and everything that you can do. And so this is a part of why things can feel complicated. The nice thing is that there are lots of patterns that run through all of this that are going to help make it easier. Those are also only your cells, right? You are also an entire ecosystem of microbes as well. You actually have more bacteria in your gut than there are people on this planet. And so we all have to work together, not just coordinating our own cells, but coordinating the wonderful, friendly helpers that we carry inside us. And that's an important part of how to eat and stay healthy. So I also want to challenge us to redefine how we think about health and wellness. There are three main pieces that I keep in mind when I am trying to approach health, and that is balance, communication between your brain and your body, and resilience, right? So how can you handle the things that life brings to you? The body is a healing machine. It is unbelievably amazing at getting well. We just have to give it what it needs to do the work. And then we can sort of stand back and watch it happen. So, oops, we skipped a slide there. Your body's constantly communicating with you, right? It's sending you memos. Maybe you feel tired. Maybe you have a headache. Maybe you have a rash, or you're itchy, or you have a cough, right? All of these are ways that your body's communicating with you. And we have a tendency in this culture to sort of suppress those things, to think of them as annoying. Instead of listening to what the body wants to tell us, we try to shush it, or we try to cover it up and ignore what it's saying. And the problem is, these messages are not trivial. They have a purpose and they're important. Just like on your car dashboard, when a warning light goes on, it's telling you that there's something that needs attention. And if you ignore that, then sometimes the body is going to get louder and louder. until it can make you listen. And so you can start off with something minor, but if you ignore it, then it can develop into a major health problem that you wish you didn't have. So one of the main points that I work with all my patients on is learning to approach all those symptoms and messages from your body with openness and curiosity so that you can solve them before they become detrimental. We also have to talk about what it is that we are saying back to our body, right? So it's not just our body talking to us, it's also us talking back to our body. And one of the main ways that we communicate with our body is through food, right? What are we putting in our face? I am blessed to get to teach a health class at the local Montessori high school. And I often explain to the kids that when you put in junk food and tons of sugar and lots of processed chemicals, you're basically flipping off your body, right? You're giving yourself the middle finger. And if you keep doing this all the time, sooner or later, the conversation is going to get nasty, right? Your body's going to start saying some mean things back. And so I want you to think about the food you put in as a way of talking to and giving love to your body. Why do we eat? Right? Why do we do this? Why is it so important? So food gives us the raw materials that we need to build cells, repair things, grow, right? And that's vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats. We need fuel to power our daily functions and get the job done each day. And so that's really in the form of carbohydrates or fats. And then why else do we eat? We eat to feed our good guys. Remember that giant ecosystem that's larger than all the people on planet Earth, they need food too. And so a lot of what we feed our bodies is also to support our microbiome and keep it healthy and strong. And finally, we eat to socialize, right? There are a lot of layers for humans that are related to food and emotion or food and social connection. And so that part can't be ignored if we really want to have a healthy relationship with food and a healthy mind and body moving forward. There are so many different diets out there, and everyone claims to be the magic diet that's going to fix you. It's like the toothpaste aisle, and you're just faced with hundreds of choices and you don't know. And there's messages coming from all directions that sometimes are contradictory. And so I really want to distill down for you. There are 5 basic things that need to come from your diet for it to be healthy, no matter what else is or isn't in that diet, right? Whether you are vegan and you don't eat animal products, whether you are paleo and you eat a ton of animal products, whether you are somewhere in between, all healthy diets follow these 5 rules. The first one is whole foods, right? Not processed. Mother Nature has packaged our foods to have all the things that are necessary to work together synergistically to allow you to absorb those nutrients well, to allow you to process them appropriately, and to make them less bad for you, right? To less work for you to break down. When we take rice and we strip off the outer coating and we smash it and puff it into a rice cake, we lose a lot of its nutrition. If you eat a piece of fish, that has a ton of nutrients. When you eat a fish stick, not so much, right? A lot of the vitamins and minerals have been lost in processing, and you've really diminished the health value of that. And so I strongly encourage you to think about the food you're eating. If it came out of a box or a can, it's probably not the best form. I want you to stick to the outside of the grocery store and buy things that don't have ingredient lists, right? When you buy a package of blueberries, there's no ingredient list. It's just blueberries. When you buy a piece of chicken, it's just chicken, right? And so that's what I would like to mention. And again, whether you eat meat or don't, or eat fruit or don't, grains or not, whole foods are the way that you want your food to come. Mostly plants, right? We have this myth, I think, that back in the caveman days, humans ate a ton of meat. And that honestly is not true. The most ever really in our diet, with the exception of people who live in the Arctic Circle where vegetables are just not available. But with the exception of people who live under the snow all the time, pretty much every human population throughout history has subsisted mostly on plants. When an animal was hunted, that was way more time consuming, way more energy spent getting that food, and there was no refrigeration. So basically, everybody would have to just share it and finish it and eat it. So a couple times a week, people would have meat. But most of the time, what they were eating were nuts, seeds, berries, greens, other vegetables, and things they could find in nature, and a ton of variety. You ate what was in season because that's what you had. And then you moved on to the next thing when that came into season. And Mother Nature takes you through a whole array of colors and a whole array of textures and nutrients. A lot of people don't know this, but there are something called phytonutrients. And phytonutrients are all of those things that help us fight cancer and dementia and heart disease, like resveratrol, right, from grapes, and lutein and zeaxanthin from a whole variety of foods that actually help protect your eye health, right, and help stave off things like macular degeneration. There are 22 vitamins and minerals, but there are 25,000 phytonutrients, and you can't get them out of a vitamin pill. You have to get them from your food because most of them don't survive the processing very well. And they are coming, a lot of them, from the pigments in these foods. And so by eating lots of different colors, you are getting a much bigger chunk of those 25,000 phytonutrients that your body benefits from every single day. There are 6 food colors, and at the end of this talk, you'll get a couple handouts in your email. And 2 of them are related to eating all these colors. One of them is a coloring page in the shape of a rainbow to help you kind of track how many colors you've had for the day. Your goal is to get all 6 every day if you can. It's fine to double up on some, but try to get at least all 6 colors in some form each day. And then the other one is a shopping list because it's hard to eat if you don't go buy it at the grocery store first. And so I'm including those to help you do this. Healthy fats. So in the 80s, fat kind of became the bad guy in this country. And a lot of the problems we've had since then have kind of been the natural result of taking fat out of our diet and replacing it with sugar and carbs. Because, as I mentioned before, carbs are really just fuel. They don't have a whole lot of other health benefits for us. And you only need whatever fuel you need to get through your day. Anything else gets stored in your body as fat, which is not what I mean when I say healthy fats. Dietary fats come in a lot of different forms, but a lot of them are needed to actually be the coating around each side, around the outside of each of our cells. They're the building blocks for hormones. They're the building blocks for neurotransmitters sometimes, and they're the lining of our brain cells. And so if we don't have enough healthy fats, we end up in big trouble. Some of the types of fat we can make in our body, but there are a couple that we can't. And omega-3 is one you've probably heard of because omega-3 is something you have to eat. You cannot manufacture it. And if you don't get enough, then some of those really important functions I mentioned, especially in the brain and in the heart, really suffer. And so omega-3 foods are critical. Is there a question?
Dr. G, yeah, there's a question I think related to this point. Okay, so the question is, do you think eating fish more than 3 times a week increases the risk of stroke?
Not if you are sourcing it well. And we're going to talk about sourcing in a minute. So there's nothing in fish, particularly the fish itself, that is actually harmful to you unless you're allergic to them. However, some fish are grown in waters that are highly contaminated with heavy metals, or they're grown in farming communities that actually are using a lot of chemicals on the fish. So then they become heavily contaminated with PCBs and other plastics and other toxins. And so those things can certainly do harm. But no, seafood's actually very healthy. Eggs also. I actually, and again, we'll talk a little more about this with sourcing, but eggs became the bad guy for a very long time. But eggs themselves, if they are raised correctly and the chicken is healthy, because what the chicken eats matters too. So if the chicken is eating a bunch of grain, or the cow is eating a bunch of grain, right, then you are actually creating inflammation and different types of fat inside the chicken, inside the eggs, inside the beef, than what you get if those animals are eating what they're supposed to be eating. So eggs are actually a high omega-3 food if the chickens are outside eating bugs all day. If they're not eating bugs, then they don't have very much omega-3. And they also, if they're stressed and locked in cages, then those eggs have very inflammatory fats. It changes the makeup and it even changes the color. If you've ever bought an egg from a local farmer and cracked it open, that egg yolk is bright orange, almost the color of the piece of salmon on this slide. If you crack open a normal cheap egg from the grocery store that's not claiming to be, organic or free range or any of these things, and you crack it open, those yolks are yellow. They don't look orange at all. And that's an immediate marker to tell you whether that's a healthy fat or not, okay? Healthy egg yolks, those bright orange ones, are not gonna hurt you. Healthy fish are not gonna hurt you, okay?
Okay.
So omega-3 you can get some from those healthy eggs that I mentioned. Salmon is the highest, although, again, it matters where you source it because sometimes salmon is being raised in an unhealthy way in Atlantic farms with some PCB contamination. But if you're getting wild Pacific salmon, they are pretty clean and they are amazingly full of omega-3. Flax seeds, chia seeds, sardines, mackerel. There's so many good sources of omega-3 fats. And you need omega-3 fats in order to have a healthy brain and a healthy body. You also need omega-9. And so omega-9 fats we can make, but it's not something we do efficiently. And so these are the fats that help us make good cholesterol and keep our hearts and our blood vessels in our brain nice and clean and healthy. This is why olive oil is touted for being such a healthy fat, because it's full of omega-9, okay? Avocados, coconut, olive, these are the fats you should cook with at home. If you're going to cook, you also have to know what temperature to take it to. Olive oil can only go to about 350. After that, it starts turning into trans fats, and so you can get some unhealthy inflammatory fats from overcooking olive oil. Avocado and coconut oil can go up to about 415, 425. And anything past that, you would want to use ghee, which is clarified butter. If you take the proteins out of butter, it's called clarified, again, or ghee. And ghee can be taken all the way up to 485. And so that's the only fat you can take above 420 safely. Go ahead.
There's a question about the slide. Dave asking, what is the contents of the jar on the healthy fats slide?
That's chia cereal with mango in it, actually. That's chia cereal. So those are chia seeds. The other thing I like, if you look at the upper right-hand corner here, you'll see a whole pile of nuts and seeds. So instead of getting almond oil, right, eat almonds. Right? Instead of having walnut oil, most of the nut oils can't really be cooked safely. And so in general, if you want to use them, you're going to use them as a salad dressing or something like that. But it's totally fine for you to eat the whole food, right? Eat olives, eat avocados, eat coconut, eat nuts, eat seeds, eat salmon. Whole foods approach to getting healthy fats that you need rather than heavily processing them first. Vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil, they have some, the grapeseed and canola have some omega-3, but they are often very highly contaminated and they're much more inflammatory than the fruit oils, the avocado, olive, and coconut. And so in general, I don't recommend that people cook with anything except the fruit oils. Okay. All right. Any other questions about fats?
Yes. Rebecca asking, what were those oils again? I mean, I think you were just
absolutely. So olive oil, right? Which, like I said, can go up to 350. So it's good on the stovetop or low temperature in the oven. Avocado and coconut oil. And those are both good up to about 420. So you can use them in baked goods. And if you need something that's going to go up to 450 or 480, it needs to be ghee, which I don't have a picture of, but that's clarified butter. And you can buy that at the grocery store if you don't want to clarify your own because it takes hours.
Yeah, she say thanks. And another short question is pasta is a processed food?
So pasta is often a processed food unless you're going to kind of make it yourself. Getting a whole grain pasta makes it a little bit better so that the original ingredients themselves were not processed down. But most of the pasta you eat at a restaurant or buy at the store isn't using the whole wheat in order to make it, right? They actually strip off the healthy part on the outside of the wheat and use the inside because it makes the texture nicer. And so you're not getting very much health value from that. It has definitely lost most of the health benefits that Mother Nature packed it with to start. Okay, now some ways to have pasta in a whole foods unprocessed way would be things like zucchini noodles or spaghetti squash, right? Those are actually two favorites in my house. And so when I want pasta, if it's in season, I will usually just buy a spaghetti squash and cook it really quick and then just scrape it out and put my pasta sauce on top and I'm done. Or again, you can take zucchini or sweet potatoes or any of your favorite firm vegetables and you can either chop them into thin ribbons or you can buy a spiralizer and make them into all kinds of fun shapes in order to have a pasta-like appearance. Or you can just have small amounts of regular pasta and get most of your nutrients from the other stuff on your plate. All right. Fiber and ferments. So I mentioned that the fourth thing that we're doing, right, is feeding our microbiome. We're healing all of those good guys that are helping us. And many people don't understand how important that microbiome is to our health and function. But I want you to close your eyes for a second and just imagine what your life would be like if everybody who works behind the scenes in your town, picking up your trash, cleaning the snow off the streets, running the electric company, running the water company or the sewer company, turning on the Wi-Fi and helping with all the internet we're using right now. If everybody at all the utilities and city government and road department and all of those people just disappeared tomorrow or said they wouldn't come into work, that is what it is like to not have your microbiome, because all of that background work that we don't ever see, like I have no idea who those people are in my town, but I am so grateful they are there. And that is what your microbiome is doing. It is in the background doing all the hard work, all the jobs nobody else wants that makes everything else function. And your microbiome is critical to brain health, but I mean, critical to all health, but people don't realize that your gut talks to your brain more than your brain talks to the whole rest of your body put together. You have so many conversations between your microbiome and your brain to keep it healthy, to keep it strong, and between your microbiome and your immune system. So in some ways, your microbiome is probably the most important thing you are feeding. And so we want to have a constant supply of good guys, right? Sometimes we are exposed to cleaning chemicals, we're exposed to pesticides and herbicides and antibiotics that kill off our good guys on a daily basis in this country. And those things mean that we have to keep putting new ones in to replenish this population, and it is diverse. So eating fermented foods is a great way to put that in. Not everybody likes sauerkraut, and that's okay. But like if you look at the bottom left picture, they're making kimchi, right? There is some kind of fermented food in every culture, indigenous culture on the planet, because fermentation has always been a critical part of health. And it used to be a healthy way to store food when you didn't have a refrigerator. And so there are all kinds of fermented foods. If you don't like sauerkraut, maybe you'll like kombucha. Maybe you'll like escabeche, which is a Mexican ferment. Maybe you'll like kimchi, which is a spicy Asian ferment. And so there's all different kinds. I included pictures of 2 brands that are actually made locally with wonderfully sourced ingredients here in Cleveland. And that is Cleveland Kraut in the center, or Wake Robin. And both of them make delicious ferments. Give it a try. There's some that taste like pickles. There's some that are made with beets and carrots, so they're a little bit sweet. So yummy. They're usually in the local section, the refrigerated local section at your local grocery store. You can also feed these good guys that we're putting in with fiber, right? We need more fiber. The average American eats 11 grams of fiber per day. But when we look at indigenous populations eating an unprocessed diet, the average person eats 50 grams of fiber per day. We are woefully underfeeding our good guys at the same time we're attacking them. And so many of those same foods I listed under healthy fats, the nuts, the seeds, the chia, the flax, also come with tons of fiber. Leafy greens, other fruits and vegetables, especially berries, legumes like lentils or peas or beans. These things are full of fiber. A big bowl of lentil soup can have 13 grams of fiber in it, right? So that's already more than the average American gets on a typical day. And so really trying to be mindful and aim to get at least 35 grams of fiber a day can really make a big difference to feeding your microbiome. And no matter what diet you choose, there has to be a good source of good bacteria and a good source of fiber to feed those bacteria and keep them healthy and strong. All right. The glass in the upper right corner, those are lentils and beans and chickpeas, right? So you have chia cereal in the upper left with a bunch of berries. You have kale, my personal favorite green, in the middle. It is, if you had to ask me for one food that's the healthiest food on the planet, it would be kale. And for people who don't like kale because they think it's too bitter or they think it's too fibrous, if you massage your salad dressing into it and let it sit for 10 minutes, then most people find that it goes to a spinach texture and they're fine with that. Or you can cook it. And unlike spinach, which we have a bizarre love affair with in this country, kale doesn't get slimy when you cook it. So you can add kale to soups, stir fries, anything you want. It is so nutritious, and all the nutrients in kale are more absorbable than the nutrients in spinach. So if you had to pick one, kale wins. Those legumes are in the upper right corner, the kombucha and the kraut and the other ferments. And again, that batch of showing how kimchi is made was there just to kind of show you the historical piece of this. All right, we want you to source your food well. This is the final part. And this is the difference for many people between eating something healthy and eating something unhealthy. Two people could sit down to the same chicken dinner. And again, if it's a chicken that's been totally stressed out, packed full of corn, and been stuck in a cage its whole life, that chicken is very inflammatory. It's not very healthy. Those eggs, not very healthy, that are going to come out of that chicken. If you go to the grocery store and you look at a cut of beef that comes from grass-finished beef versus regular corn-fed beef, you will see they are not even the same color. The meat is not the same color. They don't look the same, even with our eyes. Under the microscope, they are wildly different. We also really benefit from getting food in as much of an unprocessed way as possible. So many of our animal products, many of our meats, poultry, etc., are actually dipped in antibiotics after they're killed in order to keep them shelf safe for longer, right? This is actually where MRSA came from. Those infections that people get on their skin that's been such a problem, the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, actually originated in chicken packing plants because all the workers were constantly dipping their hands in antibiotic solution to put the meat through it. And so they developed antibiotic-resistant skin bacteria and shared it with the rest of us. So there are a ton of antibiotics hidden in our food products, but not if you get it from the farmer, right? Not if you get it from a company that's intentionally not doing those things. And so read your labels. It costs a little extra to pay for this because they know it's not going to sit on the shelf for a week and a half, right? One of my friends who's a nutritionist has a wonderful phrase, and she says, real food rots. right? And so if your food isn't rotting, there's something very scary in it. When I was a kid, when you bought lunch meat and brought it home, you had to eat it in 2 or 3 days or it would get pink and smelly. And now you can buy lunch meat and leave it in your refrigerator for what, 10 days, 14 days sometimes, right? At least a week. If the bacteria do not want to eat it, that is a huge clue that you don't want to eat it either. Okay, so you want to source your food well. You want it to not be dipped in poison or antibiotics or other chemicals. The basket is an example of a CSA, right? So join some community supported agriculture where farmers directly provide produce to customers, and it's seasonal. So you'll get whatever was grown this week, whatever was harvested this week. So you don't even have to know what's in season. The farmers will just give it to you. You go pick it up once a week, you get a beautiful basket full of all kinds of amazing things. Or down below, go to the farmer's market, right? Support your local community and get amazing fresh produce that wasn't picked a couple days before it was ripe so that it could drive across the country in an air-conditioned van and ripen on the shelf. This was picked the day that it ripened. So it is so delicious and more nutritious for you. You can look for organic foods and things like seafood. There are programs like Seafood Watch that you can get and have as an app on your phone to know which of those fish are actually healthy and which ones aren't, right? So that, as I mentioned, Pacific salmon, not the Atlantic salmon, for example, or which country is a safe place to source certain fish from, right? Are there questions about the sourcing?
About eggs, actually. So the question is, are eggs that are brown on the outside better than eggs that are white on the outside?
No, it really matters. That color of the outside comes from what type of chicken they are, like what the breed is. And so that's not what's most important. What's most important is actually what the chicken's been fed and whether it was allowed to live outside most of the day. And so what you really want to know is whether they're cage-free eggs and whether they are, organic or fed, a much more natural chicken experience, like the chickens in that upper right-hand corner walking around outside eating bugs. Most of the time, I tell people to explore the signs they drive by, right? I bet you in your neighborhood, there are people who have signs out there saying, local eggs, $5 a carton or something, right? Go in, say hi, ask them if they leave their chickens outside and let them forage. And if they say yes, then those eggs are probably good. You'll know when you get them home and crack them open. At the store, there are a couple brands. Pete and Jerry's does a pretty good job. For most of the sunny parts of the year, their egg yolks are pretty orange. So if I have to buy them at the store, that's the one I buy. But I do try very hard to get them from local farmers, both to support the farmers and because they're the best. You just can't get eggs quite that good at the store. Any other questions about sourcing?
Actually, there was one, but I think you explained the glass in upper right corner of the fiber and ferment slide. So you explained those, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that was okay. So there are some other questions, but I can read like end of the slides.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. So those are the tenets, those 5 pieces, right? Whole foods, mostly plants, lots of colors, fiber and feeding the microbiome, healthy fats, and sourcing it well. Those are the same tenets that apply to any diet you look at. I wanted to talk for just a minute about how to apply some of these things specifically to supporting brain health. And so in order to understand how to support brain health, we have to understand what the major challenges are for brain health. And so I'd say our number 1 challenge to brain health in this country is insulin resistance, followed shortly by inflammation. But dehydration is also a really important one that most Americans do not consume enough fluid. And then the toxins and things that we talked about. So let's talk about how we can use food as medicine to kind of address some of these challenges. And all of these challenges also apply to the rest of the body, but we're just using the brain as an example. So starting with the easy one, dehydration. Your brain is 80% water. right? So even just a little bit of dehydration is going to have a huge impact on brain function. You might feel kind of cranky or kind of foggy, or you can't remember or focus well. That's a good sign that you might need to go get a glass of water, right? A lot of people by the end of the day have kind of a nagging headache. They're not really sure why, they're blaming it on fatigue. A lot of times, again, it's dehydration. And so that little warning light is going on in your dashboard that the water levels are low and you need to restore them. Not all fluids are created equal, right? Fluids that are full of sugar can cause more inflammation and more insulin resistance. Fluids that are full of caffeine can actually dehydrate you over the course of the day. And so I listed at the bottom a couple different things that I would encourage you to get the majority of your fluids, either as plain old water, which is magic, or flavored water, such as on the left, where you put herbs or fresh fruit or cucumber slices, right? This time of year, it's so many good choices. Strawberries are a favorite in our house, or strawberry cucumber. Just a couple slices, put in your water bottle at the beginning of the day, and then just keep refilling it. I'll go pick mint sometimes from the garden and just stick a sprig of mint in there, and it stays fresh actually for about 2 days, right? Just like a cut flower would. And so then you can have flavored water if you feel like the taste of water itself is not that exciting. And then herbal tea is another great way to have a non-caffeinated, non-sugared fluid experience that doesn't have to just be plain water. So those are my 3 favorites. Sorry, my cat may join us. And then there are lots of options, but you'll notice I'm not pushing things like juice, right? And I'm definitely not pushing things like soda. And the big reason for those is because both of them are high in sugar. Even though you didn't add sugar to your fruit juice, basically you took all the sugar out of 3 or 4 oranges, and you left all the fiber behind. And so you ended up creating basically a big jug of sugar water. Juice has a few vitamins in it, but you'd have been much better off to drink a glass of water and eat an orange than you are to have a glass of orange juice, okay? Insulin resistance totally hits the brain and pretty much every other part of you that has blood vessels. And so since that's pretty much your entire body, insulin resistance is an enormous challenge. And so I like for people to use this very simple rule. 50% of your plate should be vegetables and fruits, more vegetables than fruit, right? So mostly vegetables, and then no more than a quarter of your plate should be carbs, starches, and potatoes and corn aren't vegetables, they are starches. And so please include those in that whole grain and starch category. And then a quarter of your plate should be healthy protein. You don't have to eat a whole quarter of starchy foods if you don't want, but this is a really great way to simply create a healthy eating plan, right? Without having to count calories or, analyze things that much. If you make sure that half of what you're eating is vegetable and fruit, and no more than a quarter of what you're eating is starchy food, and about a quarter of what you eat is a protein of some source, right? So animal proteins, nuts, seeds, legumes, and that you mostly drink water, and that you only use the healthy oils. I know this one lists canola. Again, I'm not as much of a fan of canola myself. It's pretty contaminated. If you want canola, you really need to buy it organic. But the fruit oils, the olive, avocado, and coconut oils are all great choices in moderation on your meals. I also, on the right-hand side, have a little shout out to the fact that exercise and sleep are also huge players for insulin resistance. And so it's not only diet, but diet is a huge driver. You'll notice I didn't include dessert. If you want dessert, that's fine, but it should replace the starchy stuff, right? Dessert plus the rice, pasta, bread, potatoes, corn should all add up to no more than a quarter of your meal, okay? And should be as whole foods as possible. When we have high levels of insulin resistance, this is the setup for those strokes, for dementia, for a lot of the chronic brain deterioration that we blame on aging is really insulin resistance and inflammation. And so just know that you can be totally sharp into the end of your life as long as you are not basically trashing the blood vessel supply to your brain. Are there any questions about this?
Yes. The question from Rebecca is, what does she think about bottled smart water?
Smart water. Yeah. So unless you are engaging in some kind of crazy intensive exercise, I will honestly tell you that most of us get plenty of electrolytes from the food that we eat. And so I don't generally recommend, and vitamins and minerals too, trying to put those things in your water. They're generally in very processed form. They often come with artificial sweeteners as well. And so, are there a few companies on the market that are relatively clean? Yes. But anything that's got added sweetener, anything that's got, again, a very processed version of those vitamins and minerals, you'd be better off, again, having that piece of fruit or those vegetables or eating a healthy meal and then just drinking regular water. Now, if you are running a marathon and you want to take something that's an electrolyte drink to help boost it because you are pouring buckets of sweat out, absolutely, that's a special situation. But
Yeah,
most of us
that's what
are
she
not
added.
getting to that point. Yeah. And I would
Sorry,
never
Dr.
drink
G.
Gatorade. I would never drink Gatorade. Gatorade is basically salty Kool-Aid, right? It is not a health drink. I just want to make that clear. It has so much sugar in it. Even when people are sick with a tummy infection and having diarrhea and stuff, Gatorade actually makes the diarrhea worse because it has so much sugar that it actually pulls water into the gut. And so, yeah, I'm not a super fan of this. There are a few things we've improved on Mother Nature, but most of the time Mother Nature does it best.
Yeah, I'm sorry. She was just saying that for someone that works outdoors, even the zero flavors, Gatorade, something like that. Yeah, she was adding to her question.
Yeah, so if you work outdoors and you're worried about it and you think you're going to get dehydrated, what I actually tell my patients to do is to put some fruit. So there's a little bit of natural sugar, again, slices of strawberry, something like that, in your water bottle, and then take a pinch of sea salt, just a pinch of sea salt. If you feel like you're going to get dehydrated, put it in the water bottle, shake it up, and go. Okay, because then you are having that whole foods approach, and it's way cheaper, right? It's way cheaper, and you will get all of the same benefits that you would have gotten from paying 99 cents per bottle for that other water. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be my vote. That would be my vote, is to basically make it at home.
Okay.
Okay.
And okay, so can I ask another one?
Yeah.
Okay, so another anonymous attendee asking, what is bad about processed meat like cold cuts?
Right. So there are actually a lot of toxins added. So nitrates are the most famous. They're the actual reason that it lasts so long in the refrigerator now and doesn't go bad in a couple days. And those nitrates are really toxic to your immune system. So toxic, in fact, that they actually did a study on children and looked to see kids who ate lunch meat or pepperoni or other nitrate, processed meats 4 times a week or more. So just imagine sending your first grader to school with like a lunch meat sandwich 5 days a week, right? They would be in that 4 times a week or more servings. Actually had 75% increase in leukemia and lymphoma compared to children who did not eat, who had 0 to 1 servings of nitrates per week. Okay. So 75% higher risk of leukemia and lymphoma. And this is in little kids. This is when their immune systems are strong and healthy. And so if you imagine playing that out over a lifetime, you see all kinds of immune dysfunction that accumulate, autoimmune stuff in addition to the cancer. And so those nitrates are really harmful, right? They also often have, again, antibiotic exposure. Often the animals that are being used for lunch meat are the animals that are not raised as wonderfully, right, as naturally. And so lunch meat's an easy way for it not to matter that the meat might not have looked quite as good as a regular cut of meat. And so So anyhow, that's another piece that you run into with the processed meat, is that often just the quality of the meat to start with was not necessarily the best. They tend to be cheap. Now, you can buy organic lunch meat. You can buy nitrate-free lunch meat. Often it's sold in the freezer. Annie's Organics is one option, or Annie's Naturals, Annie's something, and Applegate. Both of those actually will make nitrate-free lunch meat that is available at local grocery stores in Northeast Ohio. And so it's not that you can't have any lunch meat ever. However, a lot of them are really unhealthy.
Okay.
Any other
questions? Yeah, Rebecca says, thanks. And another question, if a person eats a healthy diet, is it necessary to have a vitamin pills?
No, not usually, right? If you're pregnant, sometimes, it's hard to eat quite enough for two unless your diet is really amazing. And so I do recommend prenatal vitamins, or at least folate, for pregnant women. But actually, in general, if you eat a really healthy diet, you do not need a multivitamin. They've pretty much shown that in lots of studies. If you eat your rainbow every day and you get your healthy fats and you eat well-sourced animal proteins or some other source of proteins, it does not have to be animal-based, but you get healthy protein in your diet as well, you don't need a vitamin. You get plenty of things. If you are completely vegan, if you eat no animal products of any kind, the only vitamin that is not found in plants at all is vitamin B12. And so you can eat nutritional yeast, or you can take a B12 supplement. And so that is the one exception. If you are on a vegan diet, completely animal product free, you do need a source of B12. Okay, so you can either really eat a lot of nutritional yeast, or you can take a B12 supplement. I do not take a multivitamin. It is not necessary because I eat a very healthy diet.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of more questions I'll ask later on.
Okay.
You can go on.
And so I want to talk about inflammation. Some of this is reference to some of the other things we've mentioned along the way, talking about things that are inflammatory, but especially for the brain, certain things that are pretty irritating. As I mentioned, those omega-6 oils, those vegetable oils, especially the really processed ones, cause a lot of vascular damage and a lot of inflammation. And so a lot of those common oils that I grew up on, right? This is what was in my mom's pantry. And so those are very heart and vascular unfriendly. Lots of sugar, right? Sugar just feeds inflammation. And so sugar cubes, plus all these added food dyes and artificial chemicals, like you see in those jelly beans on the inflammation side, right? There isn't a food on the planet that is electric blue. Right? That is, I worked really hard to teach my children not to eat crayons, and it baffles me that they put them in food, right? Red number 40 is not a food. Red number 40 is a paint. It's a crayon. And again, we should not be eating it. It is really bad for the brain. We know this because people whose brains are struggling, so people with things like autism, ADHD, right, they flip out when you give them artificial food colors, right? It's clearly brain toxic. And so avoiding those added food dyes, really, again, processed oils and fried foods, so taken to really hot temperatures, all those unhealthy oils just get even unhealthier. So what you're seeing with those French fries and chicken fingers dipped in the hot oil, that causes a lot of inflammation, a huge mess for your body to have to clean up. And then those lovely, delicious char grilled stripes, right, on our meat when we put them on the grill in the summertime. Although, there are wonderful taste sensations when we get those lovely lines, they actually are very inflammatory, so much so that they increase our risk of cancer. And so trying to keep that in very small quantities is helpful. Charring your vegetables is not quite as bad as charring your animal proteins. It's not quite as carcinogenic, but it is still more inflammatory than not charring them. So just keep that in mind this summer. And again, does it mean you never eat these things? No, it just means that they don't make up a big chunk of your diet, right? You need to have, I'd say, at least 80% of what you say to your body every day is loving and healing. And then you can get away with maybe 15 to 20% of it being less friendly. Okay. Things you can do to help offset this are things like eating those high fiber and antioxidant rich berries and greens and brightly colored food, lots of herbs and spices, turmeric, ginger, garlic, all of these different seasonings. In the US, we have a pretty bland diet. We don't add the same level of seasonings that many cultures do, but actually, this is bad for us. All these fresh herbs and fresh seasonings actually help calm inflammation. Some of them so much that we even take them as supplements, right? Things like turmeric. You can actually turn off inflammatory problems with high doses of turmeric, or you can just prevent them by having them as a regular component of your diet, okay? And they're delicious. And so experiment, learn some recipes, start including more fresh herbs, more spices in your cooking. Go ahead. I think there's a question.
Actually, there was a question earlier that I can just ask here because it seems to me a little related to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The attendee says, I have read that tomatoes, eggplant, gluten, and dairy are pro-inflammatory.
Okay.
But if I don't eat these, I don't know how I can eat a Mediterranean diet, which is supposed to be healthy.
Right.
Which do you think is better, avoiding tomatoes, eggplant, gluten, or dairy, or eating the Mediterranean diet?
So I'm going to tell you right now, a Mediterranean diet doesn't necessarily mean eat Italian food all day long, right? Mediterranean diet is a whole foods-based diet that is mostly plants and has lots of nuts and seeds and seafood in it, right? That's actually the part of the Mediterranean diet that is healthy, and almost all of the fat is olive oil. Okay, and so that is a very healthy, or the fat that comes from the nuts and the seeds and the fish, right? And so it's a high healthy fat diet. It follows all 5 of those rules. It's high in fiber. Now, when we think about going to an Italian restaurant and coming home with a plate of linguine and butter, like that's, if you sit around and eat that, that is not following the Mediterranean diet, and that is not going to actually give you the heart health benefits. You still need to be, again, keeping the carbs on your plate down to closer to a quarter, whether that is Italian food carbs or not Italian food carbs. And so wheat and dairy are both inflammatory for many people, and you can 100% follow a Mediterranean diet with no wheat and dairy if those are trigger foods for you. I would tell you that probably 70 to 80% of Americans are sensitive to at least one of those two, meaning that if you removed it for 3 to 4 weeks and then tried it back, you would discover that it bothered your skin or your gut, or made you more tired, or gave you some brain fog, or, you know, made you feel maybe have migraines, right? Wheat and dairy are super common irritants because they're hard to digest and they have proteins in them, gluten and casein and whey, but especially the casein and the gluten that actually poke holes in your gut lining and in your blood-brain barrier. Okay, and so that is why they are so inflammatory for lots of people. Again, could you have a Mediterranean diet without wheat and without dairy? You 100% could. The tomatoes and the eggplant, and they should have included white potatoes and peppers in that list, are all part of the nightshade family. And just like deadly nightshade, they have small amounts, not as much as deadly nightshade, but small amounts of solenoids in them. And those solenoids are a toxin that your body has to clean up and get rid of. Potatoes actually white potatoes have the most of that toxin. And that's why you've probably been told by your mom or your grandma not to eat a potato after it's starting to turn green and sprout, right? Because then the solenoid content is actually even higher, and it can sometimes make you sick. And so some people don't clean up that toxin very well, and they get usually joint pain from eating nightshades. And so if you are a person that suffers from joint pain, again, I would recommend you try going off all of those nightshades. That's potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. and a few herbs like ashwagandha if you're taking them. But look up what nightshades are and remove nightshades for 3 to 4 weeks. And then sit down and have, a tomato pepper salad and a baked potato on one day, and then see over the next 3 to 5 days, do your joints flare? Do you start feeling achy and sore? Right? I actually happen to be one of those people that's a little sensitive to nightshades. And so for most of the year, I don't eat very many of them. I never eat white potatoes. But in August every year, I just say fresh tomatoes are worth it to me. And so I deal with a little bit of knee pain for the month of August so that I can have fresh tomatoes. And so that's it. The rest of the year, I really don't have them much. I have little bits of peppers, perhaps, or tomatoes in a dish that someone serves me, but I minimize it, and then my body can keep up with that toxin level and clean it out without a problem. Not everyone has a problem with nightshades. I would estimate probably about 10 to 15% of people are nightshade sensitive. And if you don't have joint pain, you're unlikely to be one. So even if you have to avoid nightshades, and even if you have to avoid dairy and gluten, you can totally eat a Mediterranean diet. It's just not going to look like the menu of your Italian restaurant. But that's not really what a Mediterranean diet necessarily looks like. Maybe look at the Greek food for more examples, but you're going to just be eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of olive oil, a lot of nuts and seeds, leafy greens, berries, and pomegranate, right? Pomegranate's another good one from the Mediterranean climate that's very anti-inflammatory and detoxifying. And so you can 100% follow the concept of a Mediterranean diet without having a plate of pasta, okay? Anybody else have questions about inflammation?
I mean, there was a question. Okay, so it's about these fish and salmon, but maybe you can answer later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this one maybe like is peanut oil bad?
Yeah, so peanut oil is actually very inflammatory. Peanuts, again, not for everybody, right? You might not be sensitive, but peanuts are so inflammatory that when people are allergic to them, they're probably the scariest food allergy that we see. Lots of people have lots of food allergies, but peanut allergies are much more likely to be anaphylactic and life-threatening. Peanuts are not a nut. They're a legume, right? They grow under the ground. They do not grow on a tree or a bush. They are a legume, and so they're not. They don't belong with nuts. When I talk about nuts, I'm talking about tree nuts. And so peanuts are, for many people, inflammatory. They can also cause joint problems. They can cause skin problems. If you're not allergic or sensitive to them, though, peanuts are fine to eat like other legumes, right? So should you sit around and eat only beans all day? No. But can you have them as part of your diet and be fine and healthy? Yes. Peanut oil, like all of the other vegetable oils, though, is not something that really tolerates cooking well. It tends to get very inflammatory. And all of those oils are mostly omega-6 fats. And the problem in our country is that we don't get enough omega-3 to balance it out. We're supposed to have a ratio of about 1 omega-3 to maybe 3 or 4 omega-6. And so most Americans eat approximately 1 omega-3 to 25 to 50 grams of omega-6. And so our ratio, our seesaw, is tipped so far out of balance that we get a lot of problems from that. And so you can increase your omega-3, but it's also really helpful to decrease your omega-6 to bring that seesaw back into balance. And so I do not encourage people to eat omega-6 oils because, like I said, in general, you get 10 times more of them than you're supposed to get on a typical day. And that ratio is actually the most important piece of that healthy fat balance. Anything else that feels?
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca says thank you so much for everything. How about the feta cheese? There was a question: is feta cheese bad?
Right. So, people. Yeah, people who know me know that I'm not an enormous fan of dairy. Okay, I'm just going to be honest and fess up to that bias, because when people come to see me, they are sick, right? I am a functional medicine provider at this point. That is most of what I do. And functional medicine is about solving your health problems from the root, right? And so, for example, if you have asthma, right, it's not about giving you inhalers to suppress the symptoms. It's about saying, why do you have asthma? Why is your immune system mad and irritating your lungs? And so, for pretty much 100% of asthma patients, for example, dairy sensitivity is part of that problem. And so I just see so many people having illnesses that actually stem from us eating things that our body's not designed to digest. I love cheese, don't get me wrong, but I don't eat it. That's not true. I eat nut cheeses. I eat cashew cheese. I sometimes will eat other types of plant-based cheeses. I eat pine nuts on my salads because they taste kind of like Parmesan, or on my spaghetti squash. And so I do eat cheese substitutes that are healthy and plant-based. But I discovered when I was in my early 30s and was diagnosed with vascular cancer that dairy was a big piece of inflammation for me. And so I completely gave it up. And that's been more than 10 years ago. And I feel so much better. A lot of my seasonal allergies just disappeared when I stopped eating dairy. And so that was a real eye opener for me. And again, with my patients, you know, it's well over 70% of people who don't tolerate dairy. Dairy is cow breast milk, right? You are not a cow. I am not a cow. I don't have 4 stomachs. I don't chew cud. I don't eat grass. My microbiome is wildly different than a cow's microbiome. My digestive enzyme process, wildly different than from a cow's digestive system. And so most of us are not equipped. If you are a dairy farmer and you actually have a cow microbiome because you hand milk the cows, and so you have baby cow spit on your hands and you are exposed to those bacteria on a regular basis, then you probably could tolerate dairy. And feta and goat cheese are probably some of the more digestible versions, right? But most humans actually don't do a very good job of breaking down cow breast milk, right? We're just not baby cows. And so if you're going to eat it, I totally recommend keeping it minimal. You don't have to stop it. Anytime you wonder if something is a problem for you, all you have to do is avoid it completely, meaning like 0, right? No dairy for 23 days. It takes 23 days for your immune response to cut in half. And so if you avoid it completely for 23 days, and then you try a couple servings back on day 24, and then wait 3 to 5 days to see if you have any problems, mucus, you know, gut problems, skin problems, fatigue, whatever, anything that feels out of whack. And if you don't, then fine, eat it, right? Just eat it, but source it well. Make sure that they are happy cows that aren't being pumped full of chemicals so that you're not putting in toxins that your body has to clean up, okay? I know that my anti-dairy stance is never anybody's favorite thing to hear, but there really are some amazing fake cheeses now. And if people want more information about that, they can email me. My email will be on some of the handouts. And so you could email us and ask. I'm happy to share those. All right. I love that that question was asked because, again, things like dairy and gluten and the nightshades and peanuts are kind of the top 4 categories of inflammatory foods that certain people can't have. You can develop a sensitivity to almost any food, right? If your gut is basically leaky, if you've taken an antibiotic or you had an ulcer or tons of stress, or you did something to damage the gut lining, and then you were eating a lot of a certain food, sometimes it gets in. And then that immune system underneath the lining that's there to check everything and make sure that it's allowed in and that it's not an invader may see an undigested piece of protein. And that undigested protein, according to those immune cells, kind of looks like a viral protein. And so it sets off alarm bells and it triggers the antiviral response, which is why, unlike a food allergy, which is a different part of our immune system. That's actually our anti-parasite response and comes with histamine and itching and swelling. The anti-food sensitivity response is an antiviral response. So any symptom you've ever had to a virus could be your manifestation of a food sensitivity. Most of us grew up, right? I was told when I was young, if you have a cold, don't drink milk and don't eat cheese because it thickens the mucus at the back of your throat. That's an example of the fact that most of us have a problem digesting dairy, and our body tries to protect us with its antiviral response by making more mucus. And so that is, that is a food sensitivity reaction. And it takes time. When you get sick with a virus, you don't feel symptoms, 3 hours after you catch it. You feel symptoms several days after you catch it. And so that food sensitivity response is delayed, and that makes it harder for people to notice, like, oh, I had a cheese sandwich yesterday, and today I'm a little more tired. But I'm not going to blame it on the cheese sandwich because it doesn't feel close enough in time for me to notice that connection. So food sensitivities are underappreciated and just trickier. But if you are worried that's going on for you and you want to investigate it, again, what you do is you remove it for 23 days or more, and then you put it back. Okay. That's how you do it at home without a doctor. Is there another question?
There are a couple of questions, but I was just going to ask you that. So how many minutes do we need to finish today?
I really only have, I think, 2 more slides. I'm almost done.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So toxins is the last piece that we talked about being potentially harmful for your brain. And so I just want to mention a few things that aren't on the food list, and how you can use food to help against them. So people often don't realize that the air we breathe, all the exhaust fumes, all of the factory effluent, all of these things often put quite a bit of toxin just in the air we breathe in. Our cosmetics, right? Our skin lotions, our sunscreen, our makeup, a lot of these things are full of crazy amounts of toxins. There's a wonderful website called the Environmental Working Group, or EWG.org, where you can look up your skincare and other beauty products and shampoos and soaps and see if they're toxic or not, and then look for suggestions if they are. Our water is very contaminated. You see plastics in the bottom corner. There's heavy metals being dumped in there and polluting our tuna and other things. And then all the cleaning supplies that we use in our house, many of them are very neurotoxic and reproductive toxic. And so all these other kinds of toxins are another piece that cause problems with our health. And so how can we use food to help, right? There are lots of foods that help us clean up the mess, right? Cilantro and pomegranate are 2 amazing detoxers. So start adding cilantro to things. If you don't like cilantro, parsley is also good, although not quite as potent. But some people have a genetic reason to make cilantro taste like soap. And so if you're in that category, you can use parsley instead. Onions, garlic, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, all of the cruciferous vegetables, right, are full of sulfur, and that sulfur helps us feed our detox pathways. There's bone broth there. So you can, if you've sourced your chicken bones or whatever bones well, and your animals were clean, you can boil their bones and you can get lots of nutrients that help pull toxins out of your fat. And so bone broth is another fantastic support tool. And then again, all those herbs and spices that I mentioned before are super good at helping us clean up some of this inflammation, because you do live in the real world. You are going to be exposed, and sometimes you're going to eat things that come with extra carriers you weren't looking for. And so this is how we help treat them, with food as medicine. So you decide, right, your future health path, one step at a time, one choice at a time. And so I just want you to think about where you choose to go, right? Where do you want to take this? And now if there are other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, I'm here. So there was one question earlier that Sula actually asking that. She says, I'm an aspiring marriage and family therapist. I have a question regarding gut biome. Is it biome? I'm not familiar with this term. And mental health.
Yes.
Are there any suggestions of promoting food that would benefit our gut biome and mood?
Yes, and absolutely. As I mentioned before, your gut is basically your brain. Your gut and your brain have the same kind of lining around them, and there's more communication back and forth than there is between the brain and everything else in the body. So they are basically one system, not two. And your microbiome, those bacteria and beneficial yeasts and things that actually are important utility workers for keeping the system going. If you disrupt that, you 100% can trigger depression, anxiety, OCD, person trauma. You can really run into a lot of mental health problems. And so the fiber that I talked about, eating those fermented foods is really helpful. Making sure that people are eating enough fruits and vegetables and getting those phytonutrients. So you could hand them, for example, like the coloring page, and suggest that people try to eat a rainbow. If you're counseling people that are just struggling, that's a really important way to help support. And then the healthy fats, getting enough omega-3, because if you don't have enough omega-3, then that lining that protects your brain and your gut is going to get more holes in it, and you're going to have more problems. So all those things would help.
Yes. And another question, is there any food that reduces acne or causes acne?
Yeah, so those inflammatory foods I mentioned, especially dairy and sometimes gluten, are often triggers. If you have a bad acne problem, those are the first two I tend to tell people to remove. And as far as foods that help heal, all those detox foods, right? All those detox foods, the cruciferous vegetables, the broccoli, cabbage, kale family, the garlic and onion family, and then the fresh herbs, especially the cilantro. And 1 ounce a day, here's the one juice I recommend to patients, because pomegranate juice is so detoxifying. 1 ounce of pomegranate juice, so like a shot glass of pomegranate juice once a day, is very helpful for cleanup support. And so those are all things that I would do for things like acne.
That's great. I mean, I didn't know that.
I understand. I'll tell you my teenager, right? Because I have a teenager, and
me too.
We don't eat dairy and wheat in this house. But when she does, like if she's at a friend's house or she goes somewhere and she eats it, her face absolutely tells me that that's what happens.
Oh, it's good to know.
It is.
And another one is here. Did you say PCBs are the problem with Atlantic farm salmon, or was it something else?
Actually, it is PCBs. And so that is a really common contaminant, I think, because of the way they feed them. And most Atlantic salmon are raised in this crazy like cage setup off the coast of South America. And that water is not very clean at this point. And they can't get away from it. Like they're literally in these giant metal cages out in the ocean. And so there's a lot of PCBs in farmed salmon.
Okay. And the last question I can say, because we have to wrap up today. So does eating too much fermented foods cause stomach cancer?
No. No. Eating too many fermented foods, if you don't have a healthy microbiome to start with, can cause a little bit of gas, but it does not cause stomach cancer. H. pylori, which is a particular bacteria that can colonize your stomach, is associated with stomach cancer, but that is not one that is typically found in fermented foods. And so that may be where the confusion is that there is a bacteria in your stomach that can promote cancer, but it's not going to be found in fermented foods.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. G.
Absolutely. If people have other questions, they are welcome to email the Get Well With Us at Gmail. Okay. And I will do my best to respond to those over the upcoming week. And I hope that you all found the toothpaste aisle of diet options a little easier.
Yeah, I already sent out the handouts that you sent me earlier. So yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
So I mean, is there anything else you would like to add, or I can just tell a couple of things before I finish recording?
The only other thing I would say is that there's a lot of information and it can feel overwhelming. So I would suggest that you pick one or two things to start on. So if you're not eating enough colors, then just say for the next week, I'm going to make sure I eat my rainbow. And then after that feels easy, then maybe you say, I'm going to have more omega-3s, right? Do one step at a time. This isn't Star Trek. You can't just beam up to the end of this journey, right? It's one step at a time. And that is how you create a sustainable life change. So that's all. I've been doing this for a long time. It is not expected that you will just walk away from today's talk and have a magical epiphany on this.
That's correct. Yeah. Thank you so much for like giving us all these like important and great information today, Dr. G.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I will just tell to all my attendees today that we will be having more wellness programs in fall. Please join us. And I will be sending out an online survey to you all to fill out and give us some information, what your or suggestions that we will be maybe, you know, like using for the following programs. And what else? I have some, yeah, and yeah, one thing that I will just say, you know, at the beginning of the program, there was a question about the recording or your slides, right? That I can say the recording will be shared in our YouTube library YouTube channel that they can see. And also, if you like to share your slides with us, I can send them by email.
Certainly. I'll email those to you in just a sec.
All right, so I will do that. Yeah, that's all from us today.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.